الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين يا رب لك الحمد حتى ترضى بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue speaking about the ways of character refinement. We're not going to be discussing this for a very long time to do with the tongue. Last week we spoke about the verse of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O people who believe, put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as priority and وَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا, and speak the upright word. And we talked about those 8-9 categories of the upright word. Inshallah ta'ala, I'll post it in our group so that we have a list of those things. One of the things that I want to get into right before we get started with regards to the tongue is that there's two things that go hand in hand when scholars are speaking about this, also when the Prophet ﷺ is speaking about this, is that the speaking and the hearing. So what's impermissible to speak is also impermissible to hear. What's impermissible here is also impermissible to speak, right? So a very easy example of that is backbiting. Backbiting is impermissible to say something about someone that is not very honorific when they're not there. And it's obviously impermissible to hear also, right? And that distinction is lost on many people. They feel like, well, I didn't participate in the actual act. No, you did participate. You perhaps didn't do the stabbing, but you witnessed the stabbing, and you did not either take yourself out of this event, or you did not stop the perpetrator who was perpetrating the crime. So it's the same exact issue here. Now, with regards to speech, there's two things I want to look at. The first thing is that speech is an amal. That's what Imam Malik said. Imam Malik said, "Man dara anna kalamahu min amalihi qalla kalamuhu." Whoever understands that whatever they say, they're going to be held responsible for. It's part of their actions. They have to be answerable for this. Then this person's speech will diminish. Like if people knew that they'd get in trouble for the things they say, then they wouldn't say a lot of things that usually people say. What they're trying to distinguish between are actions that we all know that we shouldn't do, whether it be stealing or acts of vulgarity, acts of shamelessness. Those things, any decent person kind of sort of stays their distance away from those things. But then there's those things that we just get away with so easily is because they don't usually go unnoticed. Like you just put a remark on someone, send a emoji as a response to someone, but we don't understand that is considered an action in the Sharia, right? We're putting something out there to be judged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the nature of every interaction, whether it's a comment on a post, whether it's a comment after you've seen something someone else do, or whether you're talking about someone else. Anything that we say, that we put out there is out there to be judged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's going to go into one of the two categories. Either those things that are going to be written on the right side, or those things that are going to be written on the left side. One of the things that my teacher used to always tell us is that, look, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's no middle book. There's either the right book or the left book, right? And when you're not sure about where your speech is going to go, the Prophet said it's better in the middle to avoid it, because it's not worth the risk. So if you don't know where something you're saying is going to be written down, is on the right side or the left side, it's better not to say it in the first place, okay? Because you don't know where that's going. There's a beautiful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It's in the Sunan, the Jami' of Imam al-Tirmidhi, where the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that, he says, لَنْ يَشْبَعَ الْمُؤْمِنِ. The believer is never satiated. Their thirst is never quenched. Min khayr, with regards to good. يَسْمَعُهُ, that this person listens to. So the believer always wants to listen to good. And no matter how much good they listen to, it's never enough. This is what the Prophet ﷺ is telling us. And then he says, حَتَّى يَكُونَ مُنْتَهَاءَ الْجَنَّةِ, until this activity takes this person directly into Jannah. So what's this activity? Just listening to good. The reason I really like this hadith, because one of the commentators said on it, he says, he didn't say the person who loves speaking good. There's no virtue in, speaking good is a virtuous action, right? But it's not recommended to speak good all the time. because lots of speech is not recommended anyways. Rather, you find people saying, hey, the wise people are the ones who are speaking less, right? And the Prophet ﷺ is guarding against the excessive usage of the tongue, right? So even when it comes to good, to excessive speeches, you won't find narrations of speak a lot if you have good things to say. No, it's the opposite. It's if you don't have good things to say, don't speak. That's what the Prophet said, right? Whoever believes in Allah in the last day, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرٍ, either you say that which is good, or لِيَصْمُتْ, or be quiet. It's not that if you have good things to say, keep going, go for it. A motivational point from the Prophet or the Quran, that if you have good things to say, keep speaking. Because you're going to end up in trouble. That's the nature of the tongue, right? But you do find the opposite, that if you have good things to hear, the Prophet said, the true believer is who? لَنْ يَشْبَعَ الْمُؤْمِنِ, the believer is never satisfied min khayrin, from good things, يَسْمَعُهُ, that they're listening to, حَتَّى يَكُونَ مُنْتَهَاهَ الْجَنَّةِ, until it leads them into Jannah. Which means when it comes to good, our thirst should never be quenched, right? Our thirst, so good advices, the recitation of the Quran, circles of knowledge, circles of insight or wisdom, or going and flocking to people who have good things to say. Many adults, many people who are really live their life, they have a lot of things to impart to the next generation, right? One of the things that's really interesting, because the reason I'm bringing that up is because a lot of us don't engage in this anymore. It was pretty much something that the previous generation used to do, which is to take the things that, in Urdu it's called buzurg, because they make a difference in the Urdu language. They make a difference between old people. There's like wise old people, and then there's old people. So wise old people are called buzurg, and old people are called budde, right? And what you want is, they would say that if you want to really benefit from people, they say, pay attention to the wise old people. They have something to share that you can't learn anywhere else, and you won't probably be able to learn that. One of the things that's really interesting is there's a dua of the Prophet ﷺ. Sorry, it's in the Quran where Allah is telling us to make the dua that when you are dealing with your parents, the thing that we're supposed to say, the dua that we're supposed to ask them, right? We're actually talking to Allah, but we're asking Allah to give them what? Rahmah. And the reason we're doing that is because كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا, because when I was young, they dealt with me. So pay attention to what that dua is, because it's a very powerful reality. When it comes to our parents, what we're being told to say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, oh Allah, irhamhuma, have rahmah upon them. And then there's a reason given, right? Like why? Just like they had rahmah upon me when I was young. So the idea is that our relationship with the previous generation and the next is supposed to be cyclic based on rahmah. It's supposed to be cyclic based on rahmah, right? So we have rahmah towards them, they have rahmah towards us, and this is a cycle. And if we do that, the hope is that the younger generation would have rahmah towards us, and then that's the cycle. That's how it continues. But one of the things that's really important is that when we stop listening to that generation, to the buzurg generation, right? When we stop listening to them, then we lose that compass and that experience that they've had with them, right? So the sources of this good can be myriad, right? لَنْ يَشْبَعَ الْمُؤْمِنِ, the believer never satiates min khayr, from good. And what is the clause in the Prophet? يَسْمَعُهُ, in terms of listening to it, right? Not speaking. If you have good to say, you could say it in limited capacity. But hearing good, we should never be satiated from that. Right? So we'd all be asking, where are the places where I can plug myself in, where I'll hear something good? Because what is the clause? What is the consequence of that? The Prophet said, حَتَّى يَكُونَ مُنْتَهَاهَ الْجَنَّةِ, because this will take this person into Jannah. Right? The end of this activity is going to be Jannah. Right? So here's the question we have to all ask ourselves, right? If in a particular day we are doing this activity and that activity and this activity and that activity, how many of those are futile? They won't be put into the category of min khayr from the prophetic wisdom. And how many of those are in the category of min khayr? And then we have to start saying, look, if the Prophet said the true believer is the one whose thirst of good is never quenched, then is my thirst of good quenched? Because if it is, then we need to do a reanalysis and ask ourselves, okay, where else can I put myself into so that I am being exposed to good all the time, right? Whatever we expose ourselves to, those are the thoughts that we're going to carry with us, right? Very simple reality. Wherever we're exposed to, those are the thoughts we carry with us. And that's why speaking is not the virtue, but listening to good is the virtue, right? Speaking is not the virtue. There's a warning against speaking in the Sharia. There's warning against speaking too much, right? Right? Remember, من درى أن كلامه من درى أن كلامه من عمله قل عمله كل قلامه. Whoever perceives their speech as being an action, because actions are judged on the scales, actions are written down, actions that we have to be accountable for on the day of judgment. Whoever understands that whatever they say, they have to stand in front of Allah and be accountable for, and the angels are not going to stop writing down what they say, when they perceive their speech to be the same level of a crime. Whoever thinks backbiting then is in the same category of crimes as theft, as zina, right? The sins of the tongue are the same categories as the sins of the body. This person is going to start speaking less, right? Because if you're trying to calculate how many sins of the tongues that people engage in on a daily basis and how many sins of the body they engage on a daily basis, the sins of the tongue will outweigh the sins of the body for every human being at every given day. But if someone understands that, no, there's no difference categories here. The difference is not in the category. The difference is in the magnitude of the sin. And sometimes, therefore, the sins of the tongue are heavier on the scales of negativity than the sins of the hands. When they process this, Imam Malik says, قَلَّ كَلَامُهُ. Their speech will diminish, because they understand the power of the words that they're uttering, right? So that's our relationship with our tongue. It's a very difficult relationship. It's a relationship that perhaps the only best way to articulate is like what the Prophet said, that whoever believes in Allah in the last day, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرٌ أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Either you speak good or you remain silent. If someone actually takes that very seriously, then يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُم. Right? Then all of their deeds, all their sins will be forgiven, and their actions would be rectified. But it's, again, the reason why that's difficult is because it's so easy to just open our mouth. It's so easy to pause it. If you look at the hadith about the warnings of speaking, there's so many, even in the last days. Right? In the last days, one of the things that happen in the last days is lies are spread quicker. There's hadith on that. One of the things happens in the end of times is that people are impressed with their opinions. Right. One of the things that happen is that the truth and falsehood are turned around. So truth is beautified and falsehood. Truth is denigrated and falsehood is beautified. Those are all from the hadith of the end of times. And one of the main catalysts of that is because people will be more open and allowed more agency to just put out things, to just speak, right? And have that, swim in the realm of ideas, right? So that's fundamental introduction to the tongue. All of the things that we're going to talk about, inshallah ta'ala, in the subsequent week are with regards to how do we take all this theoretical stuff about speaking well and not speaking ill and put it into lived reality, whether it comes to dhikr and dua and ibadah and giving nasiha and seeking counsel, istishara, and seeking knowledge, isti'lam, seeking information, and then ta'aleem and tadris, learning and teaching, and then with regards to even witnessing. Those are all things that are good usage of our tongue. Then ta'leef, making people feel comfortable with yourself, like connecting with people. And believe it or not, the ulama actually say that there was no concept of a small talk, but they actually say for ta'leef you can even say things that perhaps might seem futile, like there was no point to it, but the only reason you said it, the intention you used to say it, is to soften the person's heart towards you. Like, I really like your boots. So you're not lying in that, but it's not really it's from madh, it's just praising something. But the reason you said it is so that this person kind of lets their guard down towards you and becomes more, comfortable with you. So that's ta'leef. Then there's unsiyah, things you say to your intimate people, like your family and your spouse. And it's not considered futile, even if it's something futile, even if it's something that's not much, right? But that's because there's a purpose behind it, and then you have to have that intention to carry out that purpose. So those are all good usages of the tongue. So we're going to start with those. Then we're going to spend a few weeks talking about all the things that we should, the red lines that we shouldn't cross with our tongue, right? And the severe warnings with regards to those. But that's pretty much how we're going to spend this. Now, the reason why we started with the tongue when it comes to character is because that's the most difficult one. So there are two ways of doing this. One, we take all the easy things that we can do, right, with our character. Like, for example, use the right for good, begin everything with Bismillah. Those are all the easy things that we can do on a day-to-day basis to try and come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then there's the difficult ones, and from the difficult one of the most difficult things is to master the tongue, is to be able to speak well, right? And that's why we're going to start with that, because we don't know how long these khutbahs are going to go. So I wanted to take the most difficult thing first, so that we can maximize our time together, and hopefully inshallah ta'ala our transformation together. So we start with the most difficult thing, which is mastering the tongue. Okay, and if we can do that, then inshallah the rest of the thing is easy, and that's exactly what Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said. And there's also a hadith with regards to this. Whoever can guarantee this, and the Prophet held the tongue out, then I can guarantee them a seat in Jannah. And the idea is it's so difficult to master your speech that if someone can actually pull that off, then the treasures of the next world are open to this person, right? And likewise, Sayyidina Ali said, "Al-lisanu tarjuman al-qalb." The tongue is directly linked to the heart. It's a translator for the heart, right? So if someone has a sound heart, it will reflect their tongue. And if someone has a sound tongue, it will reflect on their heart. It's a cyclic relationship, right? So that's what I wanted to do. So just in brief review, with regards to the sacred text of the Quran and Sunnah, we don't find any virtue in speaking more, even if it's good things. Even if it's good that you have to say, it's not virtuous to talk all the time or to elongate speech. From the miracles of the Prophet is the opposite of that, is that he says, "Utitu min jawami' al-kalim." I was given from concise speech. And he was the one that no one would have minded if he spoke for long. You know, they would not. In one riwayah, someone asked him, "Why don't you elongate your khawatir?" You know, the things that he's talking about. And the Prophet said that because he doesn't want people to be in distress, he doesn't want to elongate it so that it loses its freshness, right? It's out of wisdom to keep things short so that people always want more, and then people are not bored out of it or lose focus, or just it becomes dull for them. So even the Prophet who had the best of tongues, right? In a weaker riwayah it says, "Ana afsahun nas," I am the most eloquent of people, and that's how Sayyidina Anas describes him, and Sayyidina Aisha as well. Two of the people who knew the Prophet really well, they were in very close proximity of him, describe him as the one who spoke like no Arab spoke, right? And if there was anyone who should have been allowed to just go on and be virtuous if he spoke more, it'd be the Prophet, right? Because he's not making any mistakes in his speech. It's all morally upright. Yet he doesn't, right? He doesn't. He's known for not doing that. And that's a sunnah, to not speak more when you have good things to say. If you have good things to say, don't speak more. That's the sunnah. It's not like if you don't have good things to say, then don't say much. No, if you have good things to say, then be careful on how much are you speaking. Right? And so we don't find any motivation, encouragement in the sacred text to have elongated speech or to speak a lot. Rather, we have the opposite. Right? Rather, we have the opposite. For speech, it's you don't speak much, and you have full control over your tongue. When it comes to hearing, it's the opposite. When it comes to hearing, you're supposed to plug into lots and lots of good, as much good as you can plug into, right? When it comes to listening. When it comes to speech, there's limitations of how much you can say. When it comes to hearing, though, the Prophet is opening the door. He's saying, no, the believer is one who they never get tired of listening to good, until they end up going to Jannah, right? So keep that parallel there, inshallah ta'ala, and that's a very good action item for all of us, firstly for myself, and then for everyone here, inshallah ta'ala, through extension, is that we have to ensure that our ears are open to all things good, but our tongue, even in good matters, is restricted and constrained. That's a good action item, inshallah ta'ala, from now on, if we can just focus on that, because for the next few weeks, our only focus is going to be the tongue, right? So as an introduction to that, from a practical perspective, let's just weigh our words very carefully. And if anything, let's just choose not to speak, even at times when we have this really strong urge to speak. Let's just play on the back foot and not speak. And inshallah ta'ala, the fruits of that would be grand. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.